So when I started programming, I just kind of began, right? I didn't have any idea of what exactly I was getting myself into, and I made a lot of mistakes. And so if I was to go back in time now and give myself advice for younger me when I was in that position, this is the advice that I would provide for myself. So hopefully it is helpful to some of you guys that are currently in that position. All right, let's get into it. So the first thing is, what language would I learn first? Well, the first language that I did learn was Java, but if I could start again, I would learn C. The reason I would learn C is because I feel like it teaches a bunch of raw fundamentals that are really important just in general in computer science, like stuff to do with memory management and stuff like that. But I am really grateful, however, that I did learn with Java. Like there is a caveat to that because I don't know if I would have continued programming in general if I didn't start with Java, because what I wanted to do is ultimately I just wanted to create an add-on for Minecraft. And the language that I needed to use to do that is Java. And so I also realized that programming languages are just a tool to get what you want to get done. And so C would not have helped me there. And I don't know if I would have continued down the line of software engineering if I did start C. So there is a bit of a trade-off, but if I knew that I was continuing programming in general, like for as long as I have and for as long as I will likely continue to, I would have started with C. Just because, as I said, it does teach you a bunch of fundamentals that you need to know. However, if I was to pick like one of the best languages to learn when you're first starting out, it isn't C, as C is a really complex language to learn. It would likely be Python, as Python is a really capable language. You can get a lot done with a little code, and you can use it everywhere. And with the rise of AI at the moment, you will likely be using it more and more and more, especially in AI applications. So Python is a great language to learn as well. The second thing is I was confused as to whether or not I would be a game dev or a web dev. Now, I did start out in game dev programming, and as I said, it was just an add-on for Minecraft. And it wasn't like complex AAA games. I wasn't creating my entire games from scratch. So perhaps game dev programming is way harder in that aspect. I never really touched that. But what I was comfortable in doing was creating add-ons to Minecraft. And I reached a stage there where I pretty much stopped learning. And I was just able to spit out plugins and do whatever I needed to do to get plugins created, right? And I wasn't really learning. And so what I would have suggested to my younger self is to start with web dev, as there is a much higher ceiling there, and I haven't reached it yet. You learn a whole bunch more stuff like containerization, microservices, the concept of HTTP, like the concept of a client and a server, just a whole bunch more stuff that you don't really learn in game dev programming as much, like potentially you do with client and server tech. But I haven't really delved again too much into game dev, really just add-ons to Minecraft. But I do personally feel that there is a lot more to learn in web dev. And I mean, considering I use websites on a daily basis, a bunch of different websites on a daily basis, whenever I browse those websites, I see stuff, see issues, see bugs, see ideas for what I want to program. And it's just a whole lot more, I guess it kind of brings to light a whole lot more ideas as to what exactly I want to create, as opposed to game dev, where at the moment now I don't really play games really at all. And so if I was to develop games, I wouldn't really know what to build. Whereas with websites, because I browse the internet so much and go on a bunch of different websites, it gives me a whole lot more ideas as to what exactly I want to build. I am grateful that I did start with game dev though, as it was a great bridge into programming in general, because I was gaming a shit ton. And so just being able to create an add-on for a game was really useful. But if I could go back in time, I would start with web dev, not game dev. The third thing is that I wouldn't really attend university at all. Like for me, I attended university 3 different times, once for, I believe, mechanical engineering and twice for software engineering. And I dropped out all 3 times. And the reason I dropped out, the main reason, is because the job of actually being a software engineer is to be a self-learner and to continually teach yourself. And so at the end of university, if I knew that you weren't going to know everything once you finish university, and in fact you're just starting, and I knew that you had to teach yourself beyond that, I figured, why not just start now? Why not learn how to teach yourself and then do that and get really good at that? The plus side to that as well is you don't get a whole bunch of accumulated debt. I know a bunch of people that have a bunch of debt. Like, for example, my dad currently has I believe, $40,000 in debt. He's almost 50, and he likely won't ever pay that off for the rest of his life. I'm not saying that will likely be you, or that is in the same case for everyone, but a lot of people still are stuck with student debt. And I know a lot of people as well, engineers as well, that have graduated university and ended up with not a job in their field because they finished university, they just went to university because of the pressure and because their parents told them to, or because they thought it would make a whole lot of money. And ultimately, they didn't really want to do what they set out to do, and so they never get a job in that field. The reason I went to university is because I felt like it was the safe path, the guaranteed path, the path that would, get me to get a good job. I would basically get into all the good courses, so I basically have a pick of jobs that I wanted to pick from. And my 12 years of schooling led up to that, and it was basically my primary focus for my 12 years of schooling. Get the highest grades, get into the courses, get a good job. However, that isn't the only path, particularly for a software engineer. You can become a software engineer without going to university at all. And I wish I knew that when I first started university. The fourth thing is that I wouldn't watch shows while I'm programming. A lot of the time, even now, I watch shows while I program, but it was more heavily I would actually watch them instead of programming in my younger years of programming, because I would basically have a show open on my other monitor, and I would split my attention between programming and watching the show. And what that would do is that wouldn't just be like a 50-50 split between programming and watching the show, and I'd get like half of both. It would more like be 10 or 20% would go towards coding, and I would get basically 5 times or 10 times less of the result output of programming. And I would also not be able to really fully delve myself into the show either. So I would basically half-ass both, never get the best of either world, and basically spin my wheels and go practically nowhere because I'm kind of half-assing both things. What I do now a lot of the time is I either put on a podcast or I listen to music, or I just play a show in the background and don't even pay attention to it. And I focus heavily on the actual prospect, like the actual task of coding. And what that does for me is that gets my head into the game of programming, and that makes me be able to output shit tons more than I did in my younger years of programming. The fifth thing is that I would switch jobs pretty quickly if I feel like I know everything, or I feel like I know most of the things that I could possibly learn at that job. What I realized is that you have to be continuously learning as a software engineer. And if you're not, then you're not really increasing your market value at all. So what happens is after a while of you being at a job, you start to, understand all these different concepts and things, and that's great. That's what you should do. But if you end up reaching that ceiling, what happens is you don't end up increasing your market value, and actually you start to go backwards as technologies evolve and you become outdated, particularly if you don't work on side projects in your free time. And so you basically stay where you are now without ever improving. And that's never a position that I want to be in. I want to be continuously improving, continuously learning, continuously increasing my market value. And so some advice for younger me is that if I was in that position where I feel like I'm no longer learning, which was the case when I was creating Minecraft plugins, I felt like I knew most of the things I needed to know, pretty much everything that I could know, and I didn't evolve my learning beyond that. I was just comfortable. However, once I got into web dev and I kind of saw all of the things that I never knew I didn't know, then I'm starting to learn again and starting to increase my market value again. And it's just going up from here. And I just haven't even come close to that ceiling of knowing a whole shit ton of things that I don't know yet. And basically I want to be on a job that pays me to learn, because especially in your younger years, there's no better place to be than at a job that pays you to continually increase your market value. But if you're not taking advantage of that and you're really just there because you're earning money, then I don't think that's worth it, in my opinion. So these are the 5 tips that I would provide to myself in my younger years when I first started out programming. I hope that it gives you some perspective as to potentially what you could do as well if you're just starting out programming. And I hope it does help you guys. So thank you very much for watching. And remember, don't do what you feel like doing, do what is required.